On today's show, if Luka's knee is as hurt as it seems like it is, do we have to reframe this entire series? And Luka said he's letting Kyrie down. Do we believe him? Talk about all that and more today is Locked On Mavs.
I'm Luka Doncic, and this is Locked On Mavericks podcast.
How about 10 Mavericks? NBA champions. Bang! It's good!
And the Mavericks have won the game!
If you don't believe, you shouldn't be here.
Loyalty never fades away.
Welcome. You are locked on to the Dallas Mavericks. My name is Nick Angstadt, media member and NBA channel manager for the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks for being part of the show, making Locked On Mavs your first listen today. The best way you can help us grow the show is to listen every day, leave a 5-star review on any podcast platform, like the video on YouTube, and comment anything below. In the comment section, I want you to give me your confidence meter in this series that the Mavs will win. Scale of 0, I think the Mavericks will absolutely lose, to 5, standing on business. I'm still holding the PJ pose. And I think that the Mavericks will absolutely win. 0 to 5. Let me know in the comment section. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $150 win or lose. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. And joining me for part 2 of this home and home from The Athletic and the ironically named Only Mavericks podcast. What you got for me, Tim Cato?
You're a video show. We've been over this. We just covered this on part 1 over on my feed, the Only Mavericks podcast. We actually didn't talk about basketball at all. It was a mountain climbing podcast.
we did talk
Talked
about
a lot
that.
about Mount Everest.
A lot of Sherpa talk, just a lot of,
Yetis.
Yeah, we did talk about that.
There was some Bigfoot. Isn't Bigfoot and Yeti the same mythology?
Bigfoot, Yeti, and Sasquatch, I feel like, are all just the same thing. It's like, oh man, I almost went religious on you.
I honestly, I grew up Christian. I know exactly what you're talking about. We don't. But yeah,
God, Allah, and
things get echoed throughout human history with different terminology.
Here's a better one. It's like how every single group of people has a dragon or a version of a dragon in their like lexicon, and
sometimes they call them wyverns. That's a word.
Okay,
yeah,
Slovenia
has dragons. Here, there's a tie-in.
We brought it back.
Was this halftime show, or was it? I think it was Fridays. Was the Duncan Dragons, which are the Slovenian guys who come in and they do the trampoline dunks at halftime, right?
They miss so much.
They do miss a lot.
Love them.
Yeah,
really appreciate them going all the way over. They miss a lot.
The only halftime show allowed to miss is Red Panda.
Still going. Still the GOAT.
Yeah.
We'll talk about this series. I want to go big picture. We went completely just game 4 over on the Only Mavericks podcast. We're now doing big picture. I want to talk about are the Mavericks just 2 quarters away from sweeping the series? We'll talk about why the Mavs can't handle the non-Kawhi Clippers offense. But I want to start here, Tim Cato. If Luka's knee is as hurt as it looks, and it does look hurt, it looks like he's really struggling. You just obviously tell he just hasn't been the same type of player we've seen. Do we have to reframe this entire series and reframe the Mavericks' plan in this series?
It depends on what hurt means, right? So I was looking back through the timeline of this. This was the injury that, like, he hadn't suffered something in game 2 that led to him leaving the game in game 3, right?
Yeah, I don't.
Yeah, so he had someone ran into him in game 3, and but I guess what I was building to is that Luka wasn't himself in games 1 and 2 either.
Right.
This is I clearly he is moving around slowly. He's got a couple days off now. I am glad for the record that they just are like knee injury. They're not saying knee inflammation. And then all of a sudden this becomes the first round knee inflammation series. He's clearly, to go from game 2, which I thought might have been his best defensive game ever, to game 4, where he just wasn't able to do it. That's an issue. And they need Luka to be a competent defender that does a lot for their defense. I think they can hide him a little bit, and they've done that at points this regular season. But the combination of him playing deep into the 40-minute mark, now has a knee. Clippers are doing a really good job targeting him specifically. And then they're also Dallas is asking everything they ask of him offensively. Yeah, that's not a good recipe. That's not a recipe that even if Luka was perfectly healthy, if he's playing 45 minutes a night, if he's always getting targeted and he's taking the most shots on the team, he's going to wear down. Something about that has to give even before we get to the injury, and we just don't know the status on that. But to me, as I think about it, maybe the knee affects him, and maybe this is something that we can explain away the next few games. But Luka hasn't been himself offensively. And I just I can't believe what I'm seeing from a player, who is still the most impactful, second most impactful player on the team. But we know he can be better, and this is probably the worst 4 games he's ever played in a row in a postseason setting on the offensive end. And we know that's not usual.
We have gotten used to Luka being a playoff riser, that when the playoff come, we know that Luka will step up his game. And he has been an MVP candidate all season and been great. And so you look at this series, man, he plays really well against the Clippers always. You look at him to rise and to take that next level of the playoffs, and we just haven't seen that. He's arguably taken like a step back from what he did in the regular season. And the defense has been better, but the offense has been a step back a little bit, and not in a step back in a good way like that he likes to take. But you look at that, and that's where I think you reframe it. So, okay, how can the Mavericks change their approaching it? They've got to get other guys involved. We talked on your show about Kyrie, and does he need to get involved a little bit earlier? He didn't score until 5:55 left in the second quarter in game 4. I mean, does he have to do that a little bit earlier? He goes on a run and really kickstarts the Mavericks there. And do the Mavericks have to shift things? And I think that you kind of do. And I think that you have to adjust what Luka is capable of. And man, playing him all these minutes, you alluded to it. Like, he played almost 45 minutes in this game. Like, I know you can't really it's hard to get away with non-Luka minutes. And the Mavericks are getting killed in the non-Luka minutes. And he was a +10 in this game 4, by the way. Kyrie was a -5 and all the talk and all everything. But it's almost like, can you get him any more? Can you find him any more minutes? Can you just give, can Exum play 3 more minutes and get Luka 3 more minutes on the bench? Can they just find that somewhere? Because you can't ask him to do the same things that you would ask Luka to do if he was healthy. And that's where I think we land with this.
Yeah. And, as you talk about magnet games and, without all of the context, if this was just a regular season game, it'd be a lot easier to just point at game 4 and say, magnets, that was probably the main thing that affected the loss. It also does have some effect on the offense early on when the Clippers are hitting every shot, and Dallas has struggled to score pretty much all the series. In fact, the second half was the first time that they actually, broke through and started scoring at a rate that we're more accustomed to them doing in the regular season. But when all of those shots are going in, obviously some of the ways that Dallas makes up some points on the offensive end, because they don't have as many good shooters, they don't have, creative players outside of Luka and Kyrie. One of those ways is transition, is fast break stuff. And if they're not getting those, if the Clippers aren't even challenging Dallas at the rim, certainly, and thus leading to those, huge swing, court flipping plays where all of a sudden it's a block shot and there's somebody just sprinting the other way, or it's a steal and it's going the other way. If what the Clippers were doing, which was smart, was shooting threes and shooting above the break threes, which meant that, it's not just like some guy in the corner who has to rotate all the way back. They have a lot of their defense back already. And if the shot goes in, it doesn't matter. So there is a little bit of that you can point to. But I also think Luka needs to be a little bit more physical, like bring a little bit more force to the game early on. And it's so weird. Who am I to critique this guy who, I have, been, despite what some people on Twitter may say, I have been like the number one promoter of how good this person is for quite some time. I would like to feel certainly one of the top promoters. You and me both have. We know he can be better. We don't need to say like this is specifically. I mean, I guess if there's one thing to say, this specifically is the 3-point shot, and there's a lot of trickle down from that. But we know he can be better, whatever way it is. We know he's capable of that.
I'm going to make an analogy that'll get me in trouble, but hey, that's why we're here, right? You saying that Luka needs to be more physical when he's dealing with the injury, and I kind of agree with you. He needs to have more force, needs to play a little bit more. Is like all the political analysts are being like, Biden just needs to get out there and spread and get out there more, get in front of more people, spread his message more, be out there more. And you're like, one of the reasons why this people don't want to vote for him is because you're hearing the gaffes and the him slurring his words sometimes and all that. Like, you want to get him out there more and do more. And I think this is, now we're in this cycle in the same way that the political thing is, where it's like, okay, he gets out there more, he plays more physical. Does he get more hurt? Does it just make the problem worse? And so, I don't know. I'm very curious to see what Luka looks like in Game 5 and to see if people end up voting for him in November. So coming up, let's talk about Luka and Kyrie. Luka had a quote about Kyrie saying he feels like he's letting him down. Let's talk about that and see if we agree on that coming up. Today's episode is brought to you by DoorDash. This Mother's Day, get something thoughtful for your mother. My mother lives in a different state. Your mother may live in a different state, or just a different city, or just really far away, and you just aren't able to get her something for that day. Maybe you're planning on doing a dinner later or something else. You can use DoorDash to get her not just food and meals, but you can also get all kinds of different things too. You can get stuff from retail stores. You can get stuff from convenience stores. You can get stuff from, name a store. Yeah, that one. You can get stuff from DoorDash on there as well and get it delivered right to your mom. Does she have a sweet tooth? Is she a tech enthusiast, a beauty connoisseur, all kinds of stuff like that? You can get it with DoorDash. Shop and save that would make her proud with a DoorDash membership. You'll save $0 delivery fee and reduced services fee on eligible items and orders from DoorDash merchants that meet the minimum subtotal. Other fees, including service fees, apply. Terms apply to that as well with that DoorDash membership. So go ahead and get your Mother's Day a gift as unique as she is with DoorDash. Use that code LOCKEDONNBA to get 50% off your next order, up to $15 when you spend $15 or more on your next flour, convenience, grocery, or retail order now on DoorDash. Use that code LOCKEDONNBA. Ordering on DoorDash today. Terms apply.
My first shot, my first make.
Thanks, everybody, for hanging out with us on Locked On Mavs, being part of the show, part of the Raccoon Squad, listening every day. We appreciate each and every one of you for subscribing to the show. Check out the Locked On Sports Dallas YouTube channel and Amazon Fire channel. Get 24/7 all of our shows playing linearly. If you can't decide what to watch one day, turn on Locked On Sports Dallas and just watch one of those shows. Could be me, could be somebody else talking Dallas sports, all kinds of great stuff. All right, Tim Cato. Luka said he feels like he's letting Kyrie Irving down. He was, upset after the game. He was not really answering a lot of questions about his knee. Didn't really want to go into specifics, but he said, "I've just got to help him more. I feel like I'm letting him down. I've got to be there. I've got to help him more. He's giving everything that he has. He's been amazing for us this whole series," giving his favorite word there. Do you agree that Luka needs to help Kyrie more? Do you agree with this sentiment from Luka?
I mean, yeah. I mean, what was the stat that you tweeted out? He has one fewer point than Kyrie this series on 31 more shots.
I think he's taken 23 more shots. What's the actual? He's taken 23 more shots than Kyrie in the series, and he scored one more point.
Okay, so I was close. It's again, this is so tricky because Luka is everything that made me think. I think if Luka was the same version of himself from, let's say, the last few weeks of March or the last few weeks of February, this would be a sweep because Dallas won the two with Kawhi healthy, and I think they could have won games 1 and 4 with that. Obviously, butterfly effect, all this stuff. This team is still good. This team's ceiling still is fully because of Luka Doncic. And there's an expectation he's going to be better. I think he will be. I still think he will be, even with this lingering knee injury. I watched him hit too many threes, more than any player in the league, not named Steph Curry, this season, to think that, he's actually not, a bad shooter now, or that
fooled
that
us. He tricked us all.
Yeah. You know what it reminds me of? We compare Luka to LeBron James. You remember how LeBron, his jumper would just break for like one series at a time? Like, this happened often. He'd go through a stretch and just nothing would fall. And then all of a sudden he gets it back. So maybe Luka is being a little bit, he's being a little too LeBron-esque, which there's not a lot of ways you can say that in, but this right now is one of those ways. But even if it's the knee thing, like, he wasn't hitting that many shots in games 1 and 2. In game 4, he had a couple trips to the free throw line that were shaky, even when he made them. I believe he had an 0-2 trip. He also had a 2-2 trip where both of them were like rattling around the rim, just barely hung on and fell through. It does seem like there is something that just is off about him. off about his game. And I'm not willing to say that's anything physical. And I'm not willing to say it's something that's going to continue throughout the series, even if he's not 100% healthy. Brad Townsend pointed out last night that he's been kind of stuffy in both his post games. So there may be some sort of like allergy, sickness, something else going on. So there's a lot of things that could just be affecting him a little bit. Luka's always risen above that in the playoffs, especially in the playoffs. He's almost always risen above it in any context. But in the postseason, we know how good he is, and I still expect that player is coming. But along with that, we can acknowledge that he hasn't quite been that. As Kyrie said, the team is critical of everybody is critical of Luka. The team is critical of Luka. Kyrie, Luka is critical of himself. Kyrie is hypercritical of himself. So this is like the appropriate way. This is how the team views it as well. And so when Luka says that, it's not just Luka saying it. It's Kyrie, a very complimentary quote overall. I don't want to just take that one sentence out of context. But yes, if Kyrie if he says the team is able to be critical of Luka Doncic when they need more from him, because that's how this team is built, then yeah, I think Luka's 100% right that he is letting Kyrie down a little bit, especially when you watch what Kyrie was able to do in Game 4.
I think my favorite theory is our friend Kirk Henderson, who said that Luka's baby is in sleep regression. He's just not getting enough sleep, and that's why he just looks off. It's because he's not sleeping. His baby is not sleeping through the night, and so neither is he.
I mean, both of us know a lot about that. So, yeah,
we're the perfect two people to comment on this because we have so much experience. This is when I miss Isaac again.
Peace out.
I agree too. He's letting down Kyrie because I think he's letting himself down. And if he can say that, then I can say that and say that Luka has not been himself. Like you said, if Luka had been right, there's just so many moments in the series where you go back to the first half of Game 1 where you go, they're not playing with the same amount of force. It doesn't look like they're coming out with the same level of intensity. It doesn't feel like Luka's getting to the rim. We can go back to like Luka's rookie year or his second year, his sophomore year, where you're like, drive instead of take the step back. I feel like that was just such an argument people had so many times. Like anytime you post up, good things happen. Anytime you take a step back three, it's like, a 35% chance that something good will happen or a bigger chance that something terrible will happen because the team will get it on the other end. And so you just wish that he would be able to make that decision, to make the decision to drive, make the decision to post up. But all the things you mentioned before about his shaky shooting, he shot 4 of 12, 5 of 14, 3 of 14, and 1 of 9 from 3. And there was a point this season where I unironically went on this show and said Luka is the best non-Steph Curry shooter in the entire NBA this season. And for him to come out like this, like you just got to think that there's something wrong. And it makes you wonder like how this series has changed, what it will change if he doesn't get better.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. I think I inspired that episode. Maybe I'd been tweeting that same sentiment like the day before. I remember that episode.
You taking credit for the Only Mavericks podcast. You're taking credit for my takes. You taking
correct.
You did bring me on Mavs Moneyball at the beginning of my career too, so you take credit for that.
I always forget this, but yes, that did happen. That was many years ago. But we're all family here, so
it's wild that I was already doing Locked On Mavs at that point too.
Taking over for Jake and Mike Machine.
Jake Kemp and Machine.
I still remember that episode of that season with them two, and then new ownership.
Definitely.
Sometimes you got to swap some stuff out. So anyway, I agree, and I still expect Luka to be better. That we haven't seen his best because we have seen his best. We have seen his best so many times this season, and we know this isn't it. It's got to be coming.
The question then becomes, can Luka defend like they need to and have a Luka game that we've all been waiting for? Where's the Luka game coming from? Can he defend like they need to, and will he have a Luka game on offense? Is that what's holding him back? Is it possible?
That is the question. I would say I thought you were leading into a break.
Nope.
So I was like, it's just the cadence. I've listened to enough Lockdown. I was like, oh, he's about to. And so I was like, okay, well, all right, wind down. So
I want to end the topic.
I don't think Luka needs to be as good as he was in Game 2 every single game. I think it's fantastic that he was. I think that was I think Dallas won that game because of the defense. But Luka can give up a little bit on the defensive end A little bit. I need him to be, the team needs him to be. I need him to be. I try not to use first person. I need someone like who analyzes him, who's been begging him to try more defensively. He needs to try. He needs to put forth effort. If it's not perfect all the time, if he's not, denying Kawhi Leonard on an isolation, over 10 seconds, that's okay. You can give up some points that way. He's just got to be engaged. He's got to be making the rotations. At times, it's fantastic if Dallas can rely on him to take a star and stay in front of them. But he's also someone, just because of the offensive role they ask of him, that, yeah, he needs to be guarding corner shooters a lot. And he needs to be, his teammates need to recognize when he's getting pulled into switches and at times kind of take those duties for him. There's ways to do that. I talked to Derek Jones a little bit about that last night. And so if Luka can be the, offensive maestro that we're so used to, that gives you a lot more leeway for his defense to not quite be how good it was game 2. And it's awesome that he was able to do that. And he deserved all the praise for not just the defense, but kind of the leadership and the effect it has on the roster and the teammates around him when he does that. But what he's always been, what has carried Dallas throughout the season, is him on the offensive end. And so, just splitting the difference at this point of what game 2 is and what we know Luka offensively is, I think, that is just as much of a winning formula for Dallas as anything else.
That's exactly right. That point right there, the what do they need him to do? I phrased this question specifically. Can Luka defend like they need and still have a Luka game on offense? Yes. But it depends on what you think that they need. They don't need that Luka that we saw in game 2 and game 3. We don't need that defense from Luka to win a game. You do, he's made the point. He's made the point, and he's come out and he set the tone for everyone defensively. And I think that point was made. And so I think he can, maybe revert back to a little bit of the just solid Luka D, but also, still holding himself back and resting on defense sometimes in order to be better on offense, because I think that they're absolutely going to need that. So coming up, let's get into the rest of this series. Why can't the Mavs handle the non-Kawhi Clippers offense? What is going on with that? We'll talk about that and more with Tim Cato coming up. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. FanDuel Sportsbook has all kinds of props and odds that you can use to get in on the action. Right now, new customers get $150 win or lose in bonus bets. If you want to check that out. They've got game 5 for the Mavericks and Clippers. Mavericks favored -2.5 for the Mavericks on the road. The Kawhi Leonard-ness of it all, I think, is really messing with these the lines here on this one. So go check that out. The Mavericks are still favored in the series, -188. So as badly as you feel about this, FanDuel does not feel badly about the Mavericks in this series. So you can get that on FanDuel. They also have all kinds of other things. If you still want to bet on the finals or the awards or things like that, the Mavs, by the way, have Mavs finals plus 1,800 for the Mavericks, plus 3,500 for the Clippers. So they're way different in the odds there. Go check out all that kind of stuff on FanDuel. Again, visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. $150 in bonus bets. FanDuel.com/lockedon. All right, Tim, we've been talking about Luka. We've been talking about his knee. I mean, between Kawhi's knee and Luka's knee, I mean, we've had enough. We've had all we need between the two of those. I want to talk about the rest.
No more knees.
On the rest of this. Why can't the Mavericks handle the non-Kawhi Clippers offense? We know what's coming, or at least I knew what was coming. Did not seem like the Mavericks at times knew what was going to come in this. The Clippers offensive rating with Kawhi Leonard playing, so games 2 and 3, had 101.1 and a 98.8 offensive rating, points scored per 100 possessions. In the non-Kawhi games 1 and game 4, they had an offensive rating of 118.5 and 125.0 points scored per 100 possessions. Why have the Mavericks struggled so much with the non-Kawhi Clippers offense?
Some of it is just the very boring answer of shot making, that Kawhi is the most consistent offensive force. The offense runs through him. Yes, Harden initiates a lot of the offense, but when the Clippers were most successful, a lot of that success came from Kawhi, came from the advantages and the gravity and the consistent scoring that Kawhi presented. He was the most consistent player because sometimes James Harden and Paul George were not as consistent players. And in these 2 games, you've got the very best out of James Harden and the very best out of Paul George. And so to some extent, it just comes down to these are players who don't necessarily do this on a nightly basis, even when Kawhi's out there functioning at full strength. And I think that for 3 more games, I'm not expecting 3 more games of George and Harden playing as good as they did in game 4. It just happens that their best games. Harden's been good in the whole series, but especially for George, his best 2 games came in the games without Kawhi. I think that's more, yes, there's a little bit of expectations and hierarchy, but there's also just he played well in those games. Same thing for game 4. A lot of it was about, just the 3-point shooting. And it wasn't just Paul George. It wasn't just James Harden, but it was, the entire roster was hitting down shots. And so I think that's a big part of it. In game 1, that was a little bit more concerning that Dallas couldn't slow the offense in that one. And they did slow them to an extent, and they just couldn't, Dallas couldn't score. That was the biggest issue by far was the team's offense. But, they gave up a lot more shots at the rim, albeit, just 28 shots at the rim in game 1. But they only allowed them to make 13. And so the Clippers are not going to live at the rim. They're not going to generate a lot of points directly shooting layups or dunking the ball. Dallas's defense has pretty much proven that there's no way for them to solve that. That said, when you have a team full of, older players who are finesse skill players who can hit step back threes, who, Paul George and Kawhi, if he comes back to the series, especially, those are mid-range shooters. There is a little bit of the way that the Clippers are built. They're built in a way that, can circumnavigate Dallas's best defensive strength that they've shown over the past few weeks. And in these 2 games where they've been solid offensively, game 4 much more than game 2, I think we've seen that.
I just think the creation on the Clippers side when Kawhi is out, like they create more offense and there's just more stuff run. There's Paul George running off of double screens and running all across it was the exact same in game 1. They play quicker too. It was in game 2. They play faster. They move the ball around. They give it to other guys. The Clippers have had 17 times as a player scored in double digits so far in this series by 7 different players. The Mavericks have had 16. Only by 5 different players. So they have other options too. The Norman Powell had a 21-point game. Zubats has had a 20 and a 19-point game in this series. They've got these other options on offense, and those options are more utilized when Kawhi is not on the court because they can run other stuff, and the other guys will eat when he's not taking a bunch of the offense. And man, it's just this Mavericks team has just struggled. Even with this new defense, even with the new guys, the 2 Pacers games that they played that they lost really badly, they struggle with the pace of it and the movement and all the different, like when you make the Mavericks play catch up, when they have to chase the ball around and try and make sure that they get the exact right like rotation and all that, they've really struggled to defend. And that's exactly what we're looking at with this Clippers team. And they really need to come out and adjust in game 5, I think.
There's a lot of players on this Clippers roster that are capable of making a shot that isn't, fully something created for them. Zubats does a really good job. Yes, somebody has to pass him the ball, but a lot of the times he's getting it low and then he's, pivoting and tossing in a floater. He's done a really good job about that. We talked about that a little bit on part 1. Westbrook, enigma. You never know what you're going to get from him, but obviously he can create a little bit, just create chaos. And I think there's less room, as bad as Westbrook was in game 3, and he didn't have a good game 4. I thought he was very good in game 1. And with Kawhi out, like there's just less room on the floor. He makes a little bit less sense with Harden getting so many minutes, with Harden playing, at least 40 minutes minimum. There's not going to be as much room for Westbrook to be on the court. But when Kawhi is not out there, there is a little bit more room for just that energy, that chaos, that tempo. And that's something that has helped the Clippers overcome. That said, I still think that Dallas has shown defensively that they're limiting them to tough shots. I do think that, they're winning the shot quality battle to an extent. But the problem is, if Dante Exum and Josh Green aren't hitting wide open corner threes, and Paul George is hitting, tough 2-pointers, like what shot quality, it doesn't matter if you're winning that shot quality battle. Because if the Clippers just have enough veterans who are going to hit enough tough shots understanding, they're going to have to stop short of the rim. And if Dallas can't get a few more role player buckets to go in, Derrick Jones Jr. was sensational in game 4. That still could decide a series. But I do think that this is probably going to be the high mark for the Clippers this series offensively. Assuming
I think we said that in game 1 too.
They weren't that good. They weren't this good. Here I can 125. Excuse me. Yeah, sorry, I don't have a cough mic. So they were 119 offensive rating in game 1.
Yeah, right.
And they were 125 in game 4.
Yeah.
And I think that 125 is going to be the best that the Clippers score anytime this series, because I think Dallas's defense can do enough to limit them from layups and dunks and free throws and fast break stuff, that there is a ceiling on what the Clippers can do just by hitting jumpers and short, in the paint stuff. And I think that ceiling is what they hit with all the shots they hit in game 4.
We better hope so. We better hope that this is the high mark, because it feels like we keep saying, "Oh, they'll never shoot that well again." They shot like 48% or something in game 1 from 3, and then this one they shot 62%. But yeah, we're waiting for the James Harden fall off game. It happens every playoffs, and so I'm waiting for that. Paul George already scored 7 points in one game, so maybe a fall off from him, and then we'll watch Luka's knee, and that's something I'm really watching too, and to see how he feels and how he follows this up. How does he respond to another loss? They responded really well in game 2 to a loss. How do they respond in game 5 to a game 4 loss? Go check out Tim Cato on The Athletic. Go check out the Only Mavericks podcast. That's the name of it. That is not an adjective. That is not me describing it. But yeah,
go check that out. It's the only one.
And we'll be back tomorrow with Reggie Atatula breaking down the series. Guys, thanks so much for listening to Locked On Mavs.
Peace out.
Boom.